guys, it's Nicole and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to show you a year of growth for the Phalaenopsis Bellina orchid that I have. So this orchid opened up for me as I got back from the trip to Miami. So I wanted to walk you through from when I repotted this orchid last year and it was quite small to today where I have it blooming right now. Now, I got this orchid from Hauserman's and let me show you how I repotted it. So I got this orchid about a year ago and I repotted it along with my Phalaenopsis violacea, which I got from Hauserman Orchids together. Now this orchid came in a bark and perlite mix, and as you can see, it's pretty small, which is why I wanted to make this video and show you how it's done in the past year. So the roots coming out of that bark mix it wasn't too extensive. It didn't look super vigorous, so I was a little bit concerned at first, but as you can obviously see, this ended up doing very well. So here I am just looking at the roots, trying to find any that were very squishy and obviously dead. The longer ones looked a little bit in worse shape compared to the newer roots. So I'm just basically just giving it a feel, keeping whatever is nice and firm and getting rid of any dead roots. Now I'm usually very careful when there's only a few roots, so I decided to keep everything on even if those longer ones were a little bit squishy. So I repotted this into a 4-inch pot. The pot on the inside is a Repot Me frosted pot. These are actually go on sale all the time, so I think I bought like 20 or 30, something like that, because they were very cheap. And the outside of the pot is one of the T4U self-watering pots. And what I'm basically doing here is I'm putting some very fluffy sphagnum moss in the mix. Now this is an orchid that can be prone to rot if it stays extremely wet. So I wanted to make sure that the moss that I put into the container was nice and fluffy. Now, I did use a wick to add some self-watering wicking to the pot, just in case I was going away on vacation or something like that and needed to leave a little bit of water on the inside, because this is a very moisture-loving plant. Now, it's moisture-loving, however, it can't stay sopping wet, which is why I'm very careful with not pushing down on the sphagnum moss too much and making sure that it's in a mixture that's both airy and also retains moisture at the same time. So as you can see, since this orchid does not have too many roots, it's a little bit hard to anchor in there. But what I did is I just put the moss around as much as I could around the roots. I tried to firm it down without pressing too hard, because if you do press, as I mentioned, it'll just compress the moss and it'll stay wet even longer that way. So I was very careful as I was repotting this orchid to get the right balance between making sure that it was stable in the pot and not pressing down too much. I'd say that this approach worked well since this orchid ended up growing very nicely in the next year. I'm very happy with how it's grown, and if you guys are interested, Hauserman still has the Bellina on their website. It's $17.99 right now, and it's the same size as this orchid, and if you get one a similar size, I think you will be getting blooms within the next year, which is very nice. I'll say that the violacea was a similar size as well, and it bloomed even sooner. It bloomed for me in about 8 or 9 months since I got it, so that was a really good sign. So after carefully repotting these orchids, I ended up topping them off with a little bit of bark just to avoid the green algae that forms on top, which is a little bit unsightly. The Bellina is on the right, so as you can see, it's still relatively small here, but let's fast forward to 1 year later, where this orchid has been given a chance to grow under lights, and it's done very well. So a full year later, this orchid has grown several more roots. It's done really well in the sphagnum moss mix, and I'm happy to report that this orchid has also grown 3 new leaves. Each leaf has been larger than the last leaf, which is a good sign that you're growing this orchid well. If you have an orchid that has smaller leaves come out, then that's a sign that something's going wrong. But so far, I'm very happy with the progress of this orchid. Now, the Phalaenopsis Bellina is a summer bloomer, and this blooms sequentially. So when the flower drops, another bud is usually right behind. Now, it's October right now, so I'm not sure if I'll get another bud, but it was really nice to see this bloom. Now, the leaves are very sort of thick and succulent-like. I'll say that it grows in a downward sloping manner, unlike a complex phal, and the leaves are also really shiny. This orchid is naturally found in the wild in Borneo and Malaysia, so it's a very warm to hot grower. So I keep it indoor under lights, and it tends to do well that way. And I'd say that it likes pretty bright light. I obviously don't give it Cattleya level lights, but I'd give it Oncidium type lights. I find that when they say that Phalaenopsis orchids are low light, they tend to do better when you give them more moderate light. The bloom on this is gorgeous. It's star-shaped and it's got a very lemony type fragrance. It's like a lemony type floral scent, sort of like a lemony rose. It's very, very pleasant, and I was very happy to smell it for the first time. Now, the interior of the petals is saturated with a magenta color. There are cerulean versions as well that have a purple on the inside. I just purchased that, so I can't wait to see it. The outside of the petals are a buttery green color, and the inside to the outside of the petals just fade beautifully into this orchid. It's gorgeous. So let's take a look at the roots. In the past year, we went from about having 4 viable roots to a pot full of roots. And I'd attribute this to the very fluffy sphagnum moss that I gave this orchid. And as I mentioned, I kept the moss very fluffy, making sure that there was plenty of aeration around the roots so it's not soggy. So this orchid is prone to rot, as I mentioned as well. So provided that the mix that you give it is airy, you'll avoid these issues. The way that this orchid is potted is very important because it doesn't like to dry out. So I water this orchid as it approaches dryness. I don't let it fully dry out, and I think for success with this orchid, you don't want it to be dry for long periods of time. So depending on how big your pot is, if it's a larger pot, you'll water less frequently, and a smaller pot, you'll water more frequently. Now, the moss, as I mentioned, is very fluffy, so it's not an issue. This one gets watered about every 4 or 5 days, and it tends to do very well that way. No rest is required for this orchid. I'd say that the biggest factor in growing this well is to make sure that it's getting plenty of light and making sure that this orchid does not dry for a long period of time. This is a beautiful orchid. I was very happy to see it open for the first time. The fragrance was wonderful. And I actually bought the cerulean version as well, so I can't wait to see it. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more orchid content like this. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.